Scaling your business for success, expert insights from Daniel Lalic. Join us on Biz Bites as we explore business growth, entrepreneurship, and financial management with Daniel. Discover how to overcome financial challenges, build a strong team, and develop a winning strategy that drives results. You're going to get expert guidance and actionable advice to take your business to the next level. So tune in for valuable insights and real-world examples on business growth, entrepreneurship, and financial success. Let's get into Biz Bites. Well, hello everyone, welcome to Biz Bites. And my guest today, Daniel Lalic, and I have known each other for a couple of years now. And I've watched as his business has transformed and how he's transforming other businesses as well along the way. And I thought it was a great opportunity to get in and discuss a whole bunch of different things, because certainly Daniel is not your average accountant, would probably be the best way of starting that conversation. So Daniel, firstly, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Now, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction as to who you are and what you're about?
Yeah, no worries. As you said, I'm an accountant, so I'm a chartered accountant. Sort of a little bit tired of just working with compliance. I actually work in the business advisory space. So basically helping owners get back their two most precious assets in time and money. And we do that via assisting businesses to scale.
And that is a fantastic space to be in. And it's an unusual space for an accountant, really, in many respects, isn't it? Because people think of accountants as just doing your taxes, really.
That's right, they do. And we still do that. It's a lot of the advice we give relates back to tax. But at the end of the day, a lot of the data that's available now through your bookkeeping software and things like that, it's all very much at the fingertips of the owners. So that historic reporting of discussing what happened 6 months ago or 9 months ago or 12 months ago, I think these days people no longer really rely on that. It's more about, okay, what does the next 1 year, 3 years, 10 years look like? Where am I actually going? That's what's important to owners at the end of the day. Not necessarily how much profit they made in the last financial year. They already know.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? I mean, I think that's the accessibility of software platforms, and there's a bunch of well-known ones these days that make it so much easier to do that. So it's not a matter of plowing through your numbers. Those reports are available at your fingertips, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're a decent-sized business, you might already have a bookkeeper involved, or you might be engaging a bookkeeping service through your accountant. You have pretty much up to the day, daily reconciled accounts just in front of you. So again, it's owners already know what's going on presently. It's more about how they navigate away from that or to bigger and better things.
Well, look, I want to ask you about that as well, firstly, before we get into the moving into the business growth, because I think that is a fascinating space and that's what we want to focus on mostly. But I am interested in that perception that just because it's at your fingertips that business owners actually know and understand it, because I think they're two different things, aren't they? It's being able to access it is one thing, being able to understand what the numbers mean is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to think about every sort of business has started with the owner either being great at delivering a service, creating a product, or something along those lines. So they never really got into business to look at P&Ls and balance sheets and understand what their credit score is or anything like that. So absolutely being able to navigate through all that data and interpret it is one thing. And even just in the day-to-day business, again, they're there for a product or a service and they're passionate about that. Nobody really cares about bank reconciliations or, what does my current month to budget variance look like. So absolutely, there is a skill to that as well, but like anything, it can be taught.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? It's also being able to understand what your weaknesses are as a CEO, because often the assumption, particularly if you're a business owner, that there's an automatic assumption, and probably an inward assumption for many business owners, that I need to be on top of and understand everything. That's a really difficult ball game for most businesses. And I know someone who is in the creative space, the financial side of things does not come easily to me, whereas the creative side does, and usually it's the opposite for most business owners.
Yeah, absolutely. And fortunately, we live in a time where if you can focus on doing that thing that you're great at, you can effectively pay for people to interpret the other side of it. You can pay for somebody to do bookkeeping. You can pay for somebody to meet with you monthly and tell you about this is how you're tracking, this is what you need to focus on. And then you can either, whether that's you wanting to be a sort of more in an operational space, or some owners still just like the actual doing of the work and they just don't have capacity for it because of everything else. So if you can be in that top 5% of what you're doing, the rest of it can all get taken care of on the side. So I think that's something where owners do find themselves feeling like they need to know everything. They need to be ones driving everything, but it's not always the case. What we really work with owners to do is to let them focus on either the things that are going to earn them the highest return, so their high payoff activities, or just the things they like.
We hope you're enjoying listening to the Biz Bites podcast. Have you ever thought about having your own podcast, one for your business, where your brilliance is exposed to the rest of the world? Well, come talk to us at Podcasts Done For You. That's what we're all about. We even offer a service where I'll anchor the program for you. So all you have to do is show up for a conversation. But don't worry about that. We will do everything to design a program that suits you, from the strategy right through to publishing and, of course, helping you share it. So come talk to us, podcastdoneforyou.com.au, details in the show notes below. Now, back to Biz Bites.
But it's not always the case. What we really work with owners to do is to let them focus on either the things that are going to earn them the highest return, so their high payoff activities, or just the things they like. So, if you don't like stopping to pick up milk for the coffee machine and taking out the rubbish on whatever night your rubbish night is, somebody else can do that, and you can use that time to better your business.
Absolutely, and I think that's the interesting thing I want to ask you about is do people that are coming to you, do they need to have that self-realization first that, hey, I'm doing stuff that really I shouldn't be doing and wouldn't be good to get someone else? Or is it a case of they're coming to you for accounting and then you making them realize that there's more to it, that they could be taking this to another level?
More often than not, they're coming to us because they recognize that something needs to change. So that's probably the biggest drive with it all. So it's very rare that somebody comes to us because they want their tax returns done and we make them see the picture. Generally, it's maybe we've connected via LinkedIn, or we've dealt with somebody that they know who's given them feedback that maybe they need to be looking at doing a little bit more with inside their business. But you often find that with most businesses, the owners, they know what needs to be done. They just don't know how to navigate where they are. They just feel stuck. They go year on year, they make maybe a little bit more money, but that list of to-do items just keeps growing and growing. So I think some people can also be a little bit too proud. I think for others, they just realize they need help. And that's the biggest thing. And you'd be surprised at how many people will actually just reach out and say, hey, look, I need to come and see you because what I'm doing at the moment isn't working. And then, again, that could be at different life cycles within the business. I'm seeing a big trend these days with a lot of owners that are in their sort of mid to late 20s that have only been in business for a very, very short period of time. They just want to basically get off the tools straight away. So they're like, I want to be just sort of an owner manager. I don't want to be working in the day-to-day. But they don't know how to go about it and they're asking for help. Other times we might see somebody sort of in the middle life cycle of their business where they're really providing themselves with employment. So, they have a job, but on top of that, pay's not bad. But on top of all of that, they need to do all these other things as well. So that's the bookkeeping, the taking out the bins, the hiring, the firing, the internal processes, the compliance, all of that side of it, or we look at people that want to maximize exit and they're thinking about how do I exit, who my seller is, how do I navigate that, am I leaving any money on the table?
I love that you've identified basically three different age groups, really, in many respects of people at it, and I'm fascinated by the 20-somethings because the impatience, which is not necessarily always a bad thing, but the impatience with the younger generation is quite amazing because yes, I certainly come from the generation, and certainly my parents do, of where you start. The whole idea was that you start where you're literally probably making the tea and coffee and stacking the shelves or whatever it might be in the business before you work your way up to a point where you're running the business, before you might actually get to a point where you can bring people in and you can just be that owner, CEO type role and not have to be involved in the day-to-day. But it's interesting that they kind of come in and quickly jump to that different level.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just I think it just shows that complete different mindset. The way they grew up was different to the way maybe their parents grew up. I know I certainly came from a family where dad was about, okay, if I need to make more money, I just work more hours. So it'd be 7 days a week, it'd be 12 hours a day, and that was for him what running his own business was. Whereas I look at that and think it doesn't need to be like that. And I think that's what all of these younger guys coming through. They're sort of coming out of large corporations, they're starting their own business, and they're looking straight away, all right, my team's getting bigger. I think the one big thing is as well, there is a lot of work out there. So if you are, semi-decent at what you're doing, you can actually scale quite quickly, depending on the industry you're in. But certainly I do a lot with civil businesses. So doing a lot of the, there might be a road going in and they're doing the stormwater and all the underground services or digging for cables, things like that. Those large infrastructure type projects, there's a lot of those going on at the moment. And you can find that it's you and it's two guys and you've got a ute and you've bought a bobcat to all of a sudden you're buying a $250,000 machine and then you need a truck to tow it and then you need someone to run it and then all of a sudden you've got 10, 15 people working from you within the space of 18 months and you really don't know what's going on. So I think sometimes the circumstance that they're pushed in because of the work that's there forces their hand to look for that help as well.
And that's interesting too, when you talk about that kind of scenario. Those businesses growing quickly in terms of the income that they've got as well, or are they on a capital hunt initially as well in order to be able to have that injection of funds to be able to buy that $250,000 machine and have the 10 extra people working for them?
Look, I think initially with any business, you're reinvesting a lot at the start. So the business might be earning good returns, but there's a lot going back into the business. So you are having to rework more than you're ever going to have to. You're having to hunt for work. You might be on your first project, your second project, and something could go wrong on your third, and you don't want that to be a legacy of, well, we came unstuck on this. So I think there's a little bit of both. There is good money to be earned, but at the same time, you're having to reinvest quite a significant amount back into the business just to establish yourself. It's a little bit different once you're 5-10 years in and you're paying off a lot of your equipment and things like that, and you start to own these things and the repayments aren't going out. But again, that's something we help them navigate about. Okay, there's a $250,000 machine. What is the best way for me to structure the purchase of this? How do I maintain the security of this asset? What is the best tax setup for me selling this down the track? There's a lot of considerations that go into it.
And finding that money. I mean, how do businesses find money, particularly in the current environment?
Well, I think current environment's very, very interesting because obviously we've been hearing nonstop probably for the last 2 years about cost of living pressures. I think for some industries that has really hurt them a lot. Definitely those linked with retail are really suffering, particularly where it's discretionary spend. So you might find that somebody that's buying wine that's $150 a bottle they can afford to continue buying that wine. But somebody buying wine that's $30 a bottle is all of a sudden either we're going to stop buying wine or we're looking for something that's $15 a bottle. So they are impacted by interest rates, by cost of living pressures, things like that. So certain industries are feeling the pinch, but for others, they're almost not impacted. So that work is out there. They have good financial results. We work a lot with business about budgeting and financial forecasting as well. So you might take somebody that's in their late 20s that's, doesn't really know what a budget is. But for them, a budget is something their parents told them about when they got their first job at, the local supermarket shop and said, you need to budget your money and you need to save. And that's what their understanding of it is. And it's like, okay, I'm not going to go out for a pub meal. I'm going to make my own lunches. They liken to that. But we more look at it as a very useful tool in a business so they can plan those expenses. Coming into Christmas, traditionally, for a lot of the businesses I deal with, they're closed for 2 or 3 weeks. So you're going to find that they're doing work, they're billing it out, then nobody's on the tools, they're still having to pay wages, they're going to come back, start the next lot of work, and maybe their billing cycle is 30 days end of month, so they got paid sometime in January, there's no work that's been done, they might not be able to bill till maybe the middle of February again, and then all of a sudden they're not getting paid till sometime in March. And so it's using a budget, they can see that deficit is going to rise very far ahead and they can plan for it. They can start planning for it 6 months in advance if they need to and know that, that's the wrong time for me to go buy new equipment. And you'll find that, again, the lack of financial acumen, some clients that come in and all of a sudden we start working with them and at the end of every month they're sending us a budget versus actual variance. They're explaining why their fuel cost has gone up because they have 2 more utes and 4 more trucks and now they need to readjust their own budgets. So it's about teaching them those things you spoke about at the start where being able to interpret the data and what all of that means and financial performance, the balance sheet. That's where we really work with them so they have that understanding and they're not reliant on somebody else always to give them that information.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about this because you sit in a very interesting space. For me, it's you talk about business advisory, and you're coming from an accounting background. Where is that balance between, what traditionally might be a business coach, and the kind of the advisory part, and where does the strategy and things fit in? How do you tread that line of where you sit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think with coaching and advisory, they're somewhat different. I think the coaching is really just that hand holding of, okay, how do we work through this? How do we get through that? Whereas with the advisory, we're really trying to push that growth and that scale. So traditionally, we would always start with a form of strategy session, be it a half day or a full day, where we actually look at, okay, what does the owner want in life? What is it? Are they wanting to work 4 days a week, 0 days a week? Do they want 6 weeks off? Do they want 2 months off? We really try to find a picture of what life looks like for them and as they want it. And then we work on getting the business to be able to basically be a vehicle to get them all those things they need to in life. And so it's really that forward looking of, okay, this is the next 5 years, this is the next 10 years. And now it's a case of, okay, how hard do you want to go to get there? Is that 10-year target does actually need to be brought down to 5 years? And we're going to work really hard for the next 5 years to get to a point, and then you've sort of made it where you want to in life. And I'd say, for most people, they're not going to get to that point and coast, because the type of people that we work with, they're all about growth and scale and trying to move forward and better their businesses. So it's sort of, you find you work with clients for a few years, and then where the business was, where they've gotten to, that just reestablishes what normal looks like for them. And then there's more. Then it's okay, what's the next step? How do we get to the next stage?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That notion of moving ahead, that the goals keep changing, right? That on one hand, I mean, and it's interesting too. Even just simple things of how many days a week do you want to work? Where do you want to sit within the business? They sound like easy questions, and your first reaction might be, well, great, if I only have to work 2 days a week and I can let the thing run by myself, fantastic. But those sort of people tend to get bored very quickly, and the 2 days a week turns into either they establish a second business, or the business goals change quite dramatically, don't they?
Correct, absolutely. Or the one we see a lot is somebody who wants to work 4 days a week, but really they're just doing 5 days worth of work in 4 days. So they haven't gained anything. They don't have that extra maybe time with their family or time for themselves or focus on things because they're so tired from the 4 days that on the fifth day they don't feel like doing anything anyway. So that's another one we see a lot of too.
Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic with a business that you to be able to truly switch off, and to it's interesting, isn't it, when you end up with a public holiday or something like that where you are forced to work 4 days instead of five, and you tend to get stuff done. But you're right, you get to the end of it and you're more often than not exhausted. You've done 5 days worth of work, you've just done it in 4 days. That doesn't mean that you're going to end up with one extra day a week where you can do something else or do another business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head with that one, and I feel like every public holiday that rolls around, that's a narrative we hear a lot. Is I'm just more exhausted because I did 5 days worth of work in 4 days. Even though in that instance, it's everybody that had the 4 days. It's not like it's your business and you decided to have 4 days and everyone else is on 5. So yeah, it's absolutely getting out of that mindset.
I mean, how much of what you deal with in terms of that is about mindset? Because people are coming to you and saying, I need help. I want to grow the business. How much is mindset versus actual strategy?
I think a lot of it is mindset. I couldn't quantify it for you exactly. I think mindset and behaviors. So there's that default notion of, okay, I've got all these tasks. It's easier, emails come in. It's easier for me to deal with this right now than to delegate this to someone else because that's going to take longer. But setting aside time to delegate to someone and show them this is how you do this means that you might never have to do that task again. So it's more about breaking cycles, changing behaviors. Like really, if it's a case of you want to do 3 hours of BD a week, okay. In your diary, we're putting in a time for 3 hours of BD. It's what do you want to get from that time? You go into that 3 hours. You don't just spend it scrolling LinkedIn and calling a couple of clients to see how they are. It's a case of, okay, at the end of those 3 hours, what do you want to have succeeded? What did you start with on the to-do list and what did you finish with? And can we measure this? Can we put it on a scoreboard where we can say, okay, yeah, green tick, we've done well here, or we've just wasted 3 hours that we're not getting back.
That's such an interesting idea of just doing that. I mean, that's a great tip for people. I mean, how do you, particularly when you first start working with people and people are sitting there now, probably, how do I identify if I am the right kind of candidate for something like this? Is how do you implement a simple scorecard like that?
Probably the easiest way is just something you can see. It's on the wall. It's visible. We have one in our office. We've got a whiteboard in our office, and we maintain a scorecard for the business on that. And at any time you can turn around, look at it, and we have different measurables, and we can see whether we're delivering on them or not. So I think something that's front of mind, something that's not overcomplicated. The last thing we want to do is create some ridiculous spreadsheet where somebody's opening it and they have to work out what they're doing before they actually can write it down. So it's just something that's easy, front of mind, can look at it all the time, and people get excited about it. So, you want to see that you are winning. And if you're on track, as long as you understand why and how to get back on track, then that's okay.
I love the fact that you've done something simple in terms of just a whiteboard, right? Because immediately you would expect, particularly the accountant, I think there was some kind of complicated spreadsheet that you were going to be actioning there. And I think, and I've tried both personally, where you've got the things that are, physical things versus the things that are sitting on the computer. And it's often a lot harder to the things in the computer because it's easy to move away from it and to lose sight of that spreadsheet and that's sitting there somewhere on the side.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, some people as well are more visual and some people are more data driven. So, for instance, I know I have one client that they've got a Google shared drive spreadsheet gets updated in that, and everybody's really happy with that, and it works well for them. But in the majority of cases, it is that simple whiteboard, or it's you get those big post-it notes that can go on the wall as well. We see a bit of that too. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. I think the one big thing with spreadsheets in general is they're ultimately, I guess, make or break with the user. It's very easy to, input the data incorrectly, and then it becomes completely pointless. So we try to stay away with spreadsheets as much as you can. As taboo as that might be for someone that's an accountant.
I was going to say, are you going to lose your accounting license for saying that? But it is interesting because I think it has to be what's right for you as a business, doesn't it? It has to be what's going to work. But certainly in my experience, and as I said, I've tried both. The physical stuff is a lot easier, and I think I've seen a lot of people writing the to-do lists down next to them each day, and I think it's finding that balance as well, that the to-do list is not longer than what is that you're actually capable of doing in a day.
Yeah, absolutely. And even just allowing for unexpected things that will come up. So, that phone call, that email, that all of a sudden you're not going to get your to-do list, and then tomorrow I've got more on the to-do list. So it really is about finding that balance.
I want to come back to something we were just touching on a moment ago and just talk about the telltale signs that people are in this awkward phase of business, that you're almost treading water, right? I think that's the thing, that the business is going, you're making a little bit of profit, and as you say, growing a little bit. How does a business tend to identify the frustrations that they're having, that it's not going where they like? Because you can get so wrapped up in the business that actually taking that step back and thinking about it, that in and of itself is a big step.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think it's quite often it's financially driven. So people feel like they are working really hard and they just don't have financially enough to show for it. Or cash flow is always an issue. Like, we're never paying our bills on time. We're always checking the bank balance. That's another one. I think just overall stress and that feeling of overwhelmed. It's like, how am I going to get all these things done? I need to work more. Whether it's your partner, your spouse, your kids, how much time are you actually spending with them? I know I grew up playing sport, and there was always those kids whose parents were at all the events and functions and games, and there were those ones that were always at work. So I guess it becomes a case of what you're comfortable with and just understanding, okay, am I unnecessarily stressed? Sometimes you got to stop and ask yourself, when I got into business, is this feeling I have right now the reason I got into it? Is that what I was in pursuit of? I just want to feel overwhelmed. I want to feel like I don't have time, and then financially I don't really have much to show for it. I think if you can basically leave your business and go get a job and financially and from a leave point of view be better off, you got to think about, okay, do I need to get some help, or do I just need to go apply for a job?
Yeah, that is a very interesting scenario, because it is that point where you go, yeah, do I abandon this dream of my own business because it's easier to be employed, or is it better to say, no, there's a hope here with this business, and I want to go further? Because the problem, of course, is when you're employed, you can only get so many pay rises. Yes, you can jump from job to job from time to time and get a little bit of a hike, but the reality is you're not going to make huge gains as a general rule. Whereas in business, of course, you've got that opportunity, but is it worth all of the things that go with it?
Yeah, correct. And I think the big one is as well, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all in business, we all want to make money, but I think people underestimate how much time is actually worth. Whether it means dropping the kids off to school, whether it means leaving early on a Friday, at the end of the day, it's your business, it's your rules. So if you can create capacity in the business where, if you don't feel like going to work today, you don't really need to. You can't do that when you're employed. You can as a business owner, provided you have the right systems, processes, frameworks in place. So I think, one thing we always say to our clients, and particularly where they have issues with team, or they might have complaints about their team, which doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem with their team. Sometimes it just comes down again to their capacity to invest in their team and spend time with them. But one thing we always say is there's a reason that you're the owner and they're an employee, because in the end of the day, we're all wired a little bit differently. So for the people that are in business, there was something that wasn't sitting right with them as just being an employee. So there's a reason that they got driven into business. So I always think that their mindset is that little bit different, and they're not the type that are going to give up. But again, how much you want to grow and scale, that again comes back down to the individual.
Are there some questions or some things that people that are listening in today that should be asking themselves as a business to know whether whether they're in a situation that should be looking at the next steps? So there's some telltale signs that they should be, asking themselves and spending some time looking at before they go, okay, I'm at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think certainly from an owner point of view, I think write a list of all the things that you're doing in your business that you don't like doing, and then ask yourself the question of, okay, do I know how to stop doing these and make somebody else do them? If not, then I think you probably need some help in getting rid of those items, and then that's going to uncover some other things. I think other than that, stress, lack of time off, and then get financial performance. I think those are the big ticket items where 100%, if you're feeling the burden of those quite significantly, then you definitely need to ask for some help, some advice on how to navigate this through. I think a lot of times as well with owners, they probably know what they need to do. They just don't know how to execute those things.
I was going to ask you as well, I mean, how much of when people come to you, do you see that strategy is actually there? That it's actually, they're actually working towards a strategic way of the way they go about doing business, or is it just tend to be that the business is chugging along, but there isn't really a strategy?
Yeah, I think definitely the latter. The business is chugging along and there's no strategy. It's usually the case. I think so many businesses, they don't put time aside for strategy. They don't even put time aside to meet with their team. One thing we really work with businesses is about that regular communication with, senior leadership team, with team at, sort of the lowest sort of level where everybody's involved with, setting that time aside, that half day, that full day to review strategy and are we on track, are we off track, where can we improve? I'd say like 99% of cases, when we start working with businesses, that doesn't exist within their organisation.
Yeah, it's a pretty common thing. I think a lot of people, I wish there was another word. Maybe people will write in with a better word than strategy. When people use the word strategy, I just see the eyes glaze over and people run a mile and people say, yeah, I've got a strategy, but they're not really working towards it. It's one of those terms that I think makes most people shudder, yet is often used by consultants. But
I think the other thing, yeah, sorry to interrupt. I think the other big thing as well is you might find that there's a sole director, sole owner within the business, and then they think, well, do I need a strategy? Do I need this roadmap for the next 3 to 5 years? Because for them, they'll think, okay, for me setting a day aside every year to work on my strategy for the next 12 months, it's almost like, why am I having a meeting with myself? But it's more about the dedication to that time, that for this day or for this half day or for this 3 hours, I'm focusing on road mapping what the next 12 months looks like.
I want to ask you as well, something that you raised a little bit earlier on or alluded to that is so common in the news at the moment: economic climate, cost of living crisis, throw in heading towards an election at some stage soon. How much is that having an impact on the businesses that you're dealing with and what you're seeing in the market?
As I said, I think a lot of businesses with retail have been struggling. If they've sort of been right systems, processes, all of that in place, maybe a little bit of war chest of funds there, they've been able to navigate through and stay afloat. But certainly in infrastructure, in construction, in those areas, none of those economic indicators which would be causing pressures on most households am I seeing that are really being impacted. I think at the end of the day, if you are good at what you do, there's always an opportunity to make money.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's attitude, isn't it? A lot of it is attitude because there is that sort of famous saying that more millionaires are made in difficult times than they are when things are thriving, and it's about having that attitude and where you want to focus your time, and being a more crucial service, of course, is or product. That's part of it as well. If it's a luxury, nice to have, but not really needed item, it is going to be a little bit tougher.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is sometimes and we probably saw a little bit through COVID, where businesses couldn't provide the service or operate in the manner they always could. For some people, it really forced them to pivot and make a slight change or offer another product or slightly service a different market segment or develop a sub-brand. And for those people that really thought outside the box and pushed the envelope a bit, it's maybe that new product segment or that new service delivery is completely transformed their business and is now where they're earning a lot of their turnover from. So that's quite common too. I think when times do get tough, it's about, okay, how much initiative can the owners have in terms of just raising the bar, pivoting, doing something, thinking outside the box.
And backed onto the back of that as well is obviously collaboration, and in some respects what they do with working with someone like yourself is a collaboration, but also bringing in new opportunities, new partnerships and things. How much of that is something that you look at and see that are gaps that are missing in businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a classic one these days is that old position of your relationship manager at the bank. So certainly for those clients we have where they've been in business a lot longer, they used to have one relationship manager or bank manager they dealt with for 20 years or 30 years, and that person moved on, and it's basically been a revolving door every 12 months ever since. And they never even meet that person. They just get an email saying, I'm your new contact. So I probably, and not to throw shade on the banks, but that's been a constant complaint with a lot of clients. And I think, do you have a relationship with your bank? Do you use a broker? Do you go direct to a branch? Are you constantly using one bank, or are you positioned where you have multiple ones? Do you have a go-to lawyer? I think it's when it is just a transactional item. So you need a lawyer for a contract, you use one person and that's it. Next time you use someone else, I think then it gets really hard for leverage. I think when there's existing relationships, or when you build relationships, that's when people are prepared to go that extra distance. Certainly with our clients, and particularly with all of us in our organisation, we have sort of industries we play a little bit more in. So we do come with the ability to refer, okay, go see this person, or you need to speak to this person, and start connecting clients, and from there they can start building their own networks. Because quite often owners are so focused in day-to-day that they don't really have any kind of a network. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, I've got to go attend networking events, which you get absolutely no value from and just waste your time. But it is about putting the right set of people around you that are going to make a difference and help your business grow.
Yeah, I think that the relationships that you can have with other businesses can be crucial. I know, personally that I have a couple of relationships with businesses that complement what I do, and they date back to 25 years in one particular case. And being able to rely on them and have them effectively become an extension of your own business to add value is a huge asset.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just, you build trust as well. I think that's the other big thing. You sort of think that, well, this person's going to do right by me and I'll do right by them. And again, that's another way you sort of get rid of a little bit of that stress that you don't need to.
We've got to wrap things up, but I just wanted to ask you one final question that I like to ask all of my guests on Biz Bites. What is the aha moment that business owners have when they come to work with you that you wish they knew more they were going to have in advance?
Yeah, right. I think probably it's probably just a case of I didn't know I could do that. Is it really that simple? I think that really hits people when they sit there. Their eyes just open and like, yeah, this is all clear. I've known this, but I just haven't known how. I think that's probably the aha moment for us. So much so that we've seen it so many times, we actually guarantee the cost of our strategy sessions. So we'll happily refund clients if they're not happy with what they got, and all of them will call following up from a strategy session telling us about, at this moment, this is when it hit me.
It's amazing when people have that, and it's such a great thing, isn't it? That people can be skeptical going in, but when you can reveal, wow, you couldn't do this, and sometimes it's right in front of their faces, isn't it? It's just that they haven't taken that step back to be able to have that realization and to have someone independent that can reaffirm them and say, did you know you could do this instead that would save you this much?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly the way it is. So, and I'd say like for certain owners, sometimes it's a little bit different, but I think and this probably comes back to us being accountants, is we break things down from, okay, this is how much money your business needs to make, to what that is per transaction. And it's like, okay, you just need to see 3 more clients a week, or you need to get 10 more jobs out. And all of a sudden it's quantified, it's in front of them, and it's, okay, that's actually not that hard. I can do that. And you're telling me I can have all of these things.
I love it. Very simple advice, lots of great tips for everyone in there. Daniel, thank you so much for being a wonderful guest on the program. And we will, of course, include all of the information on how to get in contact with Daniel and his company, because I think it's a service that many, many people will be seeking well into the future.
No worries. Thanks a lot for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
And everyone, stay tuned, of course, for the next episode of Biz Bites. Always remember to subscribe so you never miss a thing. Hey, thanks for listening to Biz Bites. We hope you enjoyed the program. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Biz Bites is proudly brought to you by Podcasts Done For You, the service where we will deliver a podcast for you and expose your brilliance to the world. Contact us today for more information. Details in the show notes. We look forward to your company next time on Biz Bites.